Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Elizabeth Holmes. Last month, a 23-year-old from Ukraine was fatally stabbed on a light rail train in Charlotte. Though it received little national attention for weeks, in the last few days, the stabbing has sparked a political firestorm across all levels of government, from Charlotte to Raleigh to Washington, D.C., and beyond. WRAL political reporter Paul Specht joins us now to talk about why politicians on either side of the aisle are now paying attention to this very specific case. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So there is this just harrowing video of this stabbing circulating on social media. I'm sure people who haven't seen it do not want to see it. What does it show? What do we know about what happened on this train in Charlotte?
Right. In the video, the camera is situated sort of above the seats on the train, and you can see this woman, this young refugee, sitting in a chair with a man seated behind her. And there's no provocation. We see no conversation or anything like that. The man stands up, raises his arm. She cowers in her seat, and he stabs her in the neck. And then she looks at her wound and slowly crumbles to the floor, and he walks off. And you can see from other surveillance cameras that the knife, blood trickling away.
We know that the victim was 23-year-old Irina Zarudska. Reports say that she had fled Ukraine during the war with Russia to come to the United States.
Police have come out and said that the suspect is DeCarlos Brown, who has been arrested 14 times, I believe.
I think the first question that people are going to think is, with this long, extensive criminal history, why was he out free?
Right. So he had multiple charges, as we mentioned. Most of those were between the years of 2011 and 2014, culminating with an armed robbery that year in 2014. Now, he was pled guilty and was sentenced to 6 years in prison, which he did serve between 2014 and 2020 when he was let out in September of that year. He later, I should say earlier this year, was arrested and charged for misusing the 911 system. According to some reports we've seen, he believed that some sort of man-made device was speaking to him or something to that effect, and they had told him to stop calling 911, and he didn't. That's a low-level misdemeanor. So he was out awaiting trial. A judge released him without bail and released him back into the world while waiting his court date for that charge. And that's where he was. That's why he was on the streets in August when he got on that train.
We'll be right back. Almost instantaneously, we know that this happened a few weeks ago, but almost like overnight, a lot of politicians and political activists on the right, Republicans, started sharing this video. I remember seeing on my X feed, Twitter feed, just share after share. And it seemed like the common thread was that people were calling out the fact that Brown was walking free. And it seemed like they were trying to point fingers at his freedom and the people in the justice system who allowed him to be free. I mean, tell us about that and just kind of why this kind of happened almost overnight.
Right. Well, one big reason that this has blown up, let's go through the top reasons. The first being, we don't often see video this grisly, right? There was another stabbing very similar to this in Oklahoma in the same month, in early August. Reports out of Oklahoma say that there was a man who was riding a bus, and he randomly stood up and stabbed or sliced the throat of the person in front of him, according to police. Now, that victim lived, and there's no video that we've seen of that incident. So that may be one reason we haven't heard more about it. But another reason to consider is that Oklahoma is not home to a competitive U.S. Senate race. North Carolina is. That's why almost instantly, when this video came out, people rushed to lay blame, blaming court officials, district attorneys, judges, and even former Governor Roy Cooper, who's running for U.S. Senate here in North Carolina. There's an open seat next year because incumbent Tom Tillis has decided not to run again. So on the Republican side, the leading candidate is Michael Whatley. He's the former chairman of the Republican National Committee and the former chairman of the North Carolina Republican Party. So the video emerges, and pundits, candidates, including Whatley, including President Trump even at the White House, say, oh, this happened under Cooper's watch, that this was a result of his soft-on-crime policies. Now, we've been looking into it. We have a story on our website right now that shows exactly what happened. That assault, we already went over those details. He served prison time and was let go in 2020. That was not a result of any Cooper policy that we can tell. We reached out to the Department of Adult Correction today, and they said he wasn't released on parole. He wasn't released early. He served his time. And then in the case with the 911 call, that's up to a judge whether or not she wants to let him go. And typically, misusing the 911 system is a misdemeanor. They're not going to keep you more than, not going to keep you in jail very long. And if they do, I believe one of our researchers said that the maximum he could have been kept was about 120 days. Even then, this all happened back in January. He would have been out on the street. So there's a lot of finger pointing going around, but it appears as though what we saw with Brown's treatment and the criminal justice system, it was pretty standard. There's nothing that really sticks out as unusual or special treatment.
And it seems like the common phrase that we've seen from, critics is soft on crime. It's that soft on crime quote that we see a lot. And I know in your reporting, there was also mention of the Task Force for Racial Equity in Criminal Justice here in North Carolina under Roy Cooper. Why are they going against that?
Let's talk about that. So Roy Cooper in 2020, a month after George Floyd was killed in Minnesota, came up with a group called the Task Force for, I believe it's racial equity in criminal justice, something like that. It's a task force. That's what you need to know. And he created it in June. Well, that task force went on to make a number of recommendations on how to reform the criminal justice system. Some of that included, doing away or reducing the amount of cash bail, moving to cashless bail. And so some Republicans and some pundits have pointed to that and said, hey, if you look at this document, then, these are soft on crime policies. Well, as it relates to Brown, it doesn't, for lack of a better word. It doesn't relate to Brown because he was let out in September of 2020. That was after the task force was formed, but before it produced any recommendations. It produced its report in December of that year. So it's highly, highly, highly unlikely, if not impossible, for that group's recommendations to have somehow affected Brown. We found no evidence, no connection between the two.
Okay, so no evidence between the two, and you said that the criminal justice system kind of played out the way that it normally would in these cases. How is Cooper's team responding to all of this? Are they saying that themselves, or are they trying to point fingers almost back at Republicans the way that they're pointing at Democrats?
They've answered questions from the media, his campaign has, but they're also responding to attacks on social media, as you mentioned, including one from Vice President J.D. Vance, who had accused him of being soft on crime. And Roy Cooper's team, its X account, Twitter account, whatever, tweeted back and said, if you really cared about reducing crime, you wouldn't have cut law enforcement budgets. I presume he's speaking about the administration's big, beautiful bill that they passed just weeks ago. So, yeah, the finger pointing has started. I assume and expect these accusations to take the form of television or radio or internet campaign attacks before too long.
So obviously we've been looking at this at a very macro level. At the end of the day, this happened in Charlotte. This impacted people who were in Charlotte that day on that train. What are Charlotte leaders saying about this? How are they responding to this kind of national almost blow up in their city?
Well, the Charlotte leaders are handling it a little bit differently. Two people we highlighted are obviously the mayor, Vi Lyles. She put out a lengthy statement talking about the need for reform out there. But then there's other council members. I believe there's a man, his name is Edwin Peacock. He's a Republican city councilman. He went and rode the train around the time that video emerged of the stabbing. And he said, hey, no one checked my ticket. And there are people on this train that appear to be on it just to hang out. They're not getting off at any of the stops. I didn't see anyone check their ticket. There seems to be lax enforcement of not only ticketing, but just sort of behavior and making sure people get off where they're supposed to get off. And so this could have significant implications for their elections. And in fact, the Charlotte city councilors, including the mayor, are up for election this November. The U.S. Senate race, that election is next November 2026. The Charlotte city leaders, they have to come up with some answers and start figuring out how to handle this in their campaigns in the next 2 months.
Wow. So at the end of the day, obviously everyone, it seems like, is trying to point fingers and figure out ultimately who is responsible for this stabbing, right? We see this horrific video. We see a man stab a woman. But can we actually pinpoint the moment that the criminal justice system failed? Is there any way that we will ever know if it actually failed this man and this woman?
I will say that there are a number of people looking into this, I believe, people in the Trump administration, including the FBI. There's a group called GovOps. That's sort of an oversight group created by the legislature that said it's going to investigate. And then even the state auditor has said that he's going to probe the Charlotte area transit system to see if there was any failure on their part. I saw on social media, we've been following lots of reports out of this, including one from WSOC in Charlotte. They were at a city council meeting where the transit operator said they don't believe that Brown purchased a ticket when he got on the train that day of the stabbing. So if there was a failure in the criminal justice system or the transit system or the mental health system, I would hope, and I say this as just a observer, not someone who's cheering for any political side, I would hope they do find that hole. And it'll be interesting to see what they do come up with.
Mm-hmm. Last question for you. Have you ever seen, because obviously we cover crime in news all the time. Have you ever seen a case like this that, again, was seemingly only covered by local news for a short amount of time, blow up into something with this much political scale in your time here in North Carolina?
No, not that. If there is one, I'm having trouble imagining it as far as like a grisly crime. There are other videos that have gone viral and had severe consequences. I think back in 2010, there was a video of former Congressman Bob Etheridge, encountering someone on a sidewalk and grabbing them and demanding to know who they were. And that had big political implications. But that's still nothing compared to what we see now with the president tweeting about it. And the White House, I believe, began their press briefing with details about this and calling out Roy Cooper. I've never seen anything like this.
Okay. Well, Paul, thanks for joining us, and thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. If you've listened to this podcast on WRAL.com or the WRAL News app, you can also find it in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow the show so you don't miss an episode.